All right, I'm going to do my traditional just sort of hemming and hawing for a couple minutes to make sure that everything is working. Oh, that was fast. Okay. I don't know why it was so much faster today. I wonder if it's because I spent some time, stopping some programs from starting up when I start up my computer, specifically Slack and Spotify, and I think that might have been the things that were causing a little bit of the lag. So, hello everybody. Got people from Nairobi, Paris, New York, New Hampshire, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Colorado, all over the place. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My apologies if you got the email and the link wasn't working this morning. I guess yesterday morning, whenever you got it. I found a bug. My apologies. I should have double checked that the different ways of making it public all worked the same way, and they did not, and that was my B, and I apologize. The link should be working now, however. I put it in the chat, so if you scroll up to the top at 7:19, I sent it out. And today I am really excited because we are going to be doing a whole data pipeline today. And I'm probably going to have to find a new data set to work with. So yeah, I might work with that PLOS phonetics data set. Anyway, we'll figure it out. So we talked about versioning on day one, data versioning, when you'd want to do it, a little bit theoretical. Day two, we talked about validation, a little bit more hands-on, but we also, I know a lot of this, the pipeline stuff ends up, the best answer to a given question is it depends. So I gave you lots of options and sort of threw lots of information at you. And then today we're actually going to be doing the whole pipeline. And the reason that I saved this for day 3 is because it includes the things that we did in earlier days. And you can do this day 3 without having done day 1 or day 2, but I think it's helpful background if you haven't thought about things like data versioning or data validation previously. So that's my that was sort of my thinking in putting this together. And the sort of framework that I have found most helpful for thinking about putting together pipelines is the extract, transform, and load pipeline framework. It's also called ETL. And the way that you can put together an ETL pipeline on Kaggle is you can actually create a data set from the output of a Kaggle kernel. Wow. One sec. Let me have a little bit more coffee. Okay. I should have started a little bit earlier this morning with my caffeination. So we're going to basically be creating a data set, running a kernel on that data set that might even call other code in order to run our data validation and then do some data cleaning. And then finally, we're going to create a data set from the output of that kernel of our cleaned code. So it's a really modular process. And it follows the sort of general pipeline idea of ETL. And if you've been around for a while, you've probably, you might have run into this previously. It's been around since at least the 70s is when it started getting popular. Like my mom, who got out of the programming game before I was born, was familiar with ETL. So it's a tried and tested sort of framework. And the 3 stages are extracting, transforming, and loading. And it's more often discussed in terms of database administration or constructing databases, but I think it's also a useful framework for data scientists and for us to think about our day-to-day workflow when we're getting a specific data set, we're doing something to it, and then we want to have a version that we've done something to that we want to save. So one thing I didn't talk about here that might be relevant is if you're doing sort of training testing split, you might want to save out your training data and your testing data and your validation data. You probably want to do a 3-way split actually. So we're not going to get too deep into the theory. There's a lot of resources out there. I linked one that's sort of like a history of ETL and goes into a little bit more detail. That actually is from SAS, which some of you may use. I know there's still folks who are using that for sort of BI and data analysis sort of stuff. So the exact ways that this is going to look for data scientists, again, is going to be a little bit different from an engineer or a database administrator. So the first thing that I would do is extract data in some way. On Kaggle, that generally means creating a data set. We generally do the extraction and then load it onto the platform if you're using Kaggle for like a work thing. And you can also think of this as being sort of like your, you know, if you're using version control for your data, instead of Kaggle, you could replace that with your, you know, your company's or your personal system that you're using to do version control. Github says, I work at SAS, lol. Yeah. And WL says SAS to S to R. And that must be your personal workflow, maybe, or like evolution, because I don't think S is based on SAS. I could be wrong about that. What I know about S is that it was developed at Bell Labs, which is also where phonetics as a discipline was developed. So like my entire professional life has come out of Bell Labs, basically. Right, okay, so you could replace sort of wherever I say Kaggle here with whatever your personal data storage solution is, or wherever it is that you're running code. So your cloud provider, if you're using that, or your local system, or whatever it is that you're doing. We haven't really talked a whole bunch about getting data from databases using SQL in this particular event. That's definitely something that a lot of people will use in their pipelines. And if you are interested in learning more about SQL, I did a series, like an event like this a while ago, except there wasn't a live stream, I don't think there was a live stream, no, about using SQL. So here is the link to the first of the notebooks in that one. And then also Dan Becker, who is, I can't click. No, I don't want to scroll. I want to click it. There we go. Dan Becker, who is in charge of the Learn platform, and if you've used Kaggle Learn, has done quite a bit of work, turned it into a series on the Learn platform as well, so you can go through it that way if you are interested. And there's some exercises, and that's only if you need a refresh on SQL. I know a lot of folks who are professional data scientists are already using this day to day and are like, okay, I'm bored now, Rachel. We can move on. So some sort of general tips. There's going to be a lot of variation in here. If you're using tabular data, you'll probably use SQL. If you're using image data, probably you're not going to be using SQL. You're probably going to be doing something else, maybe blob storage that you're interacting with in some way. You might be doing streaming data, and so you have sort of a little sampler that you're using to get data as it comes in. But in general, I would recommend, I've got a couple of suggestions here. So one thing is that I would definitely save and version any scripts you use for data extraction. So if you've got a SQL query, save it and version it. I didn't used to version SQL queries, and I had something that I looked up previously and then I wanted to go back to, and I couldn't because I didn't have the version that I had, and I'd edited it since. And it took me like a week to rewrite that query because it was a chunky one. So I would highly recommend for your health and happiness that you save versions of your queries. Yeah. Oh, Austin says his team used the SQL series for some flight training and they're not data scientists. I hope it was helpful. If you are an R person and you've used dplyr a lot, it's based on the same sort of logic as SQL, and it's dbplyr is the version that's designed to interact well with databases. So instead of loading things into memory in R, because R stores its data in RAM, which can be a little bit of a bottleneck, you can use dbplyr to seamlessly connect to a SQL database backend instead. So, sorry, a little bit of an aside there, but that's another workflow you may be using. I know no less about SQL plus Python, but I know that there are things out there. I just haven't worked with them a whole bunch. You might want to version out your data set. We talked a little bit about this during the data versioning. If you're extracting a small data set from a big data set, you might want to save that, especially if the query takes a really long time to run. So we've got some BigQuery databases on Kaggle that you can't download. You can only run queries from them, and you have sort of a limited amount of queries that you can run, and it's the details are in the SQL curriculum if you want the specs. But if you have a query that takes a long time to run, or you have sort of limited query quota that you can use, you might want to save out the data set that you got so you can refer to it later. And I would probably do data validation along with extraction. So maybe even if you're using a script, like some sort of, if you're doing web scraping, for example, you might want to do data validation like as during your scraping to make sure that you are getting what you're thinking you're getting, especially if you're doing something automated and it's running like 100 times an hour and you want to make sure that you don't have 100 copies of an empty file because you forgot some sort of line ending or something, just as an example. Maybe it's happened to me, maybe it hasn't. I plead the fifth. Oh, 1 second, I'm gonna blow my nose. Alright, it is cold season in Seattle and it is in full force. So once you have your data and you validated it, it's time for the transform step. And this is probably what I would consider the meat of data cleaning. So I think of data cleaning as you have a data set in some format and you want it in a specific other format. You want it to have specific qualities. And then data cleaning is taking the raw input data and changing it to meet your specifications, whatever those are. And there's actually some people who don't like the terminology data cleaning and prefer things like, transformation or rearranging or something like that. Because I mean, the data that you get in is still useful. It's not like dirty or bad. It just needs a little loving. So if you are working with data that is your data and you've worked with before, you probably know what you need to do to it. One thing that I do pretty often is I'll get like data in a non-Latin script and it's been HTMLified. Wrangling, WL says, yes, thank you. That is a word that I was looking for. So it has Unicode endpoints that have been HTMLified, and I will have to un-HTMLify them. In Python, FTFY is a really good module for doing that. So that's just sort of a common step that I have to do, and then I'll like quickly check, and I'll be like, is there an unusually large number of ampersands in this? That might suggest that something's going on. Scrubbing, Akshay says, it's absolutely another good term. A little bit more coffee. And then I've just sort of put together a list of things. If you're looking for ideas, you need things to practice. Dealing with missing values, scaling or normalizing your data. That's more important if you're working with parametric models. Parsing dates, detecting character encodings, and things like my Unicode code points have been turned into HTML. I almost said garbage. It's not garbage. It's correct if you're trying to do HTML stuff, but if you're trying to use a lot of NLP libraries, it'll blow up. Inconsistent data entries, doing maybe some fuzzy matching, identifying outliers, deduplication, I mentioned that, and then things like making sure that percentages are treated as numbers. Sean says, how about an R function or package to un-HTML data? There might be something in tidy text, HTML to Unicode. Yeah, so it looks like it'll remove HTML tags and HTML Unicode, and that's by Julia Silge, who is at Stack Overflow and is really fantastic. He's an amazing programmer. And Anders Swanson is also suggesting Arvist. I'm assuming Arvest? I think yeah, probably RVEST, like harvest without the HAR. Yash says, I've seen people replacing missing values with the median. Can you explain the logic behind that? Yeah, so the idea is, so this is sort of like generally falls under imputation, which I talk about quite a bit in, oh, I shouldn't have clicked that. No, it's too late. Which I talk about quite a bit in those other notebooks. But if you add the, you would use the median for imputation rather than the mean, because the mean might end up skewing your data. So an example is, if you've heard this, when Bill Gates walks into a bar, the average bar patron becomes a millionaire. Nobody else got more money. It's just that he has so much that he's skewing it. So if you replace, the average income of everybody in the bar with, if you replace missing income of people in the bar with the average, you're likely to get a artificially high number for them. And if you use the median, you're more likely to get a number that sort of better reflects the population. This is a sort of general idea. And there's a lot of approaches to imputation, but mice is probably the one that I use the most often, which is a specific technique called multiple imputation by chained equations. And I talk about that more in the other notebooks, but that's sort of the general idea. Austin says, I work with sensor and meter data often, oil industry, and never throw away data on import. I filter it out, as knowing we have bad data is also important. Yeah, that's a really good point. You don't necessarily want to, like, if you have a sensor that's broken and it's sending you like 16 zeros in a row, you want to know that it's broken, right? That's useful information. And Danielle says, for missingness, if not MCAR, then multiple imputation. MCAR. Let's see. Whoop. Which is, if data are MCAR, then both blah, 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 blah. Oh, missing completely at random. Yeah. So that describes the type of data that is missing. And I think in this one I talk about different types of ways the data can be missing. Yeah, good questions. And I mean, depending on your background, there are some things that you may or may not have come across before in data cleaning. And then usually my workflow is I'll start with a new data type, I'll be really excited, I'll build a model, and then I'll look at the model and be like, this is nonsense. And I realize that I've missed something in data cleaning that I need to like go back and tidy up a little bit. So once your data is cleaned and you have it in the format that you need for whatever it is that you're doing down the line, you actually want to load it. So in Kaggle land, so this might be for, off of Kaggle, you might push it to a database, you might like email somebody a file. Like, it doesn't have to be super fancy. Ideally, you're starting to automate this and less like handing people, thumb drives that have the data that they need on them. But if you're working under certain data security measures, you might need to do that. So shrug. And it means you just have a fresh copy of your transformed data. So you have the original data, and then you've extracted it, you saved the way that you extract it, so you can do that again if you need to. You've done your transformation, you've saved everything about the transformation, so you can do that again if you need to, and then you have the final version. So I think about it as like the Sunday best. It's like your good china, right? Not that I have more than one set of china. I have like 14 mismatched plates. And this is a version that you want to show off and share, is sort of the general idea. And on Kaggle, the easiest way to save your clean data is you can just write files to disk. So if you've got a data frame in pandas and Python, you might use the the dataframe.2csv function to write it to your disk. And then when you commit the kernel, so you do have to commit it, you'll get a version of your notebook. So all of your code is versioned and you can see what code was used to produce the specific data set. And you'll also get a file in your data set that you can download or send to people. And you can also create a new data set from that file that you can then do, treat like any other data set and do your modeling or your visualization or whatever it is that you're doing. So that's a sort of general a little sip of coffee. That's a sort of general idea. And I have an example here, and we're going to go through and do a new example. So yesterday we made this data set that has information about lamb auction data. And we originally uploaded 2 files, and I figured out that the files that were breaking it were the seasonal files, the ones that weren't weekly. So I just didn't include them, but I did add some additional files. You can see I added more auction data files, and I gave myself a little note that that's what I did. And then I did some data validation. So I actually wrote a script to do this. After we finished up yesterday, I went through and I tidied it up a little bit, and I did good code modularization, and I put things into separate functions. So the things that we were doing in just sort of like one big chunk, we did in slightly different chunks. So we checked the file type. We check for missing sheep data, and I actually figured out how to do the regular expressions that we talked about if you were here for that. So you can do those by using the RE module .search, and then these are if you will return true, because we are converting it to a Boolean, if it finds any of these words anywhere in the file. And you'll notice that these are all lowercase, and we did convert them to lower, and somebody had a really good suggestion to do this yesterday. And this one, yes, this one is public as well, and it is linked in the notebook I sent out at the Script to Automate Data Validation. And you could also put this on GitHub and then import it as a GitHub data file and then import it from there, so on and so forth. Actually, I think I actually ended up downloading this, uploading it as a data set, and then adding that data set to my notebook. But this version of the script is public. And I also, in addition to checking more words, so a lamb is a young sheep, a ram is a male sheep, a ewe is a female sheep, adult sheep, a wether is a male sheep that's been castrated, and then a sheep is just a sheep. You know, they've got wool. They're farm animals. And then yesterday we just sort of like printed out the whole line that started with Richmond, Virginia. And what I did was I actually went and I got that line, and then I used the deparser function from the dateutil. So I used the dateutil.parser function from the dateutil package to actually parse the date using fuzzy matching. So we know that there is a date in this. So it looks for lines that start with Richmond, VA, and then it goes through and it parses the dates that are in it, and there should only be one, and then it converts it to a date format, and then it prints out the date that was uploaded. So it's a little bit fancier than what we were doing. And Austin says, for future reference, flags equals re.ignore case works if you are copy pasting in many values. Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. So those are the 3 things we looked for. We looked for the file type, and then whether there was lamb data or not, and then the date that it was updated, and then we just sort of put all of those functions in a different function that goes through and checks things. So the reason that I've done it this way is that I can see really quickly what I'm checking, and I can add new tests if I want. These aren't tests. I can add new things to check for if I want, and then add them to here, and it'll be nice and modular. So once I've written my validation script, I actually did my validation as part of my transform step. So what I did was I did a notebook for this, so it's a little bit easier to see because you don't get the code and then the output in a script, so I think it's a little bit harder to follow what's going on. We did need to install the magic module that we called in this function here that checks what the file type is. So that's what I've done here. We mentioned this yesterday. The bang here is a Jupyter thing. It allows you to run command line bash commands from within a notebook. It's called a magic. So I use this Jupyter magic to install this this particular module. If it's already installed in your VM and you run this, you'll get a little like, hey, we already did it notification. So it's okay to run it multiple times. It's not going to download it and install it every time if it's already there. And then I did, I think I mentioned, I don't think I made it public. I probably should have. Is the script reusable? It should be. I should be able to use it on any file that has sort of the specific assumptions I have built into it. So if it doesn't have lines starting with Richmond, VA that have a date in it, it's not necessarily going to work. But sort of generally it will. Raul says, how would you summarize what data validation is? And we talked about this a little bit more yesterday, so that is linked, the notebook in the live stream here. And it's checking to make sure that the assumptions that you are making about your data hold. So I'm assuming that there is a line with Richmond, VA that has a date in it in my LAM data, and if there isn't, I will see that in the output of my data validation. So here I am, basically I'm copying the file that has the validation script that I uploaded as a data set from the directory where it is into my working directory. And then from there, I am importing all of the functions in it. Akshay says, I mean, if you have made it once for one data set, then it's done. And how would it be useful for someone who forks your kernel? Made it once for one data set. So, oh, I see. So that might be down to, yeah, I didn't actually make that public, sorry. If this were a public data set, which I can actually do right now while I'm thinking about it, you would also be able to get access to that. So if you have a private data set on Kaggle and you fork a data set, if you fork a kernel that is attached to a private data set, you don't get access to that private data set. So you can sort of see what's going on, but you won't necessarily be able to do it yourself. And let's see, it is a data set. So I'm going to need to go to datasets to make it public. And I'm doing this on my phone because it is on my admin account. And I'll just make this public real quick. While I'm thinking about it. And it's not super pretty, but sharing, so it's under settings and then sharing, and then I'm making it public. All right, so it should now be public, and if I refresh this, although this is what I was having trouble with yesterday, yep, you can see that it is a data set that just has a single Python script in it. And then you can see that the Python script is the same as what we did in the nice syntax highlighted script. Oh, Sean says fork a kernel. So that's similar to what you would do on GitHub. It's sort of borrowed from version control. A fork, so I can do like this. If I see someone's work and I'm like, oh, that's useful, I want to play around with it. A fork is a version that starts out by default private to me that I can play around with and change, and it's not going to make any changes to the original data. Actually says, what is the purpose of automation? What is the purpose of automating validation when the script is so custom to that data set? So the automation, so yes, it is going to be custom to that data set, but every time you deal with data that is similar to that, you're going to be able to reuse your code. So I don't know how you would write a validation script that would work on all data sets. That seems like, I'm trying to think of a good like classical mythology metaphor, and I feel like there's one. It seems like an impossible task. So the automating part is that I'm reusing my code and it should rerun on similar data. And unfortunately, you probably are going to have to write different validation scripts for not only for different data sets, but also depending on what you're going to be doing with that data set. So if I'm building a parametric model with a data set, I'm probably going to want to check the distribution of data. But if I'm not building a parametric model, that's not important, so I don't need to do that. So it's going to really depend on the rest of your pipeline. But if I'm doing the same analysis or similar analysis, 100, 200 times, and there are different versions, Sabu just said, yes, then it should absolutely work and we should be able to reuse it. And if it doesn't work, then that tells us that there's been a change in our data that's going to probably end up giving us headaches further down our pipeline, if that makes sense. One second, I'm gonna blow my nose again. But yeah, it should work on different versions, and it should work on streaming data that you are sampling at different points. Good question. Thank you. Where was I? Okay, so we have imported our utility code, and then I can, because I've imported all the functions, I can just use the check lam data function, to run all the validation that I'm interested in. So I can see that all of these files are all ASCII text. I can see that some of them have missing data. So the first one doesn't have any lam data, and the second to last one doesn't have any lam data. It's missing. And I can also see that they were updated on different days. So this one was uploaded on the 29th, the 28th, excuse me, the 22nd, the 28th again, the 25th, the 16th. So the dates that they are uploaded are a little bit different for each of them. WL says, I've seen written that the code you're most likely to reuse is your own, perhaps months later. Hadley Wickham quote, maybe. Yeah, that does sound like something Hadley would say. Yeah, and if you're working even on a personal project or at a company or something, you're gonna see the same sort of thing multiple times, right? I mean, even if you're working in R&D, if you're working on sort of one video annotation project, the likelihood that you're going to work on another video annotation product later on down the line is pretty high, right? Because you have a specialized skill set as a data scientist. You got your things that you're good at. So yeah, and this is about making your life easier and also your coworkers' life easier. If I have, let's say one of my engineer colleagues is interested in doing a little bit of data analysis and they don't really know how to get started, I can share with them my validation code and my analysis code and pre-processing code, and so they can see what changes I'm making and follow along. And it's also it's kind of professional. If you hand people one big notebook with all of your stuff in it, you might get some complaints. Austin says, should be able to see your data under the data section for your day 3 notebook. So I don't actually have any data attached to this notebook. You can see if you look at the title, it says no data sources. So if we go to data, we can see that there aren't any. So you shouldn't be able to see data because there isn't data, if that makes sense. You don't have to attach a notebook to a specific data set. Good question. And I mean, that's useful if you're doing things like simulation, where you're just going to be producing code with your data, if you're doing some sort of reinforcement learning, where you don't necessarily need data to begin with, if that makes sense. Grand Potato, if this script is expected to run periodically, how do you get alerted that the validation has failed? If you can't, how can you find out when the validation has failed? That's a really good question. Right now we don't have a way to set up alerts on Kaggle. If you are doing it sort of locally, it's really gonna depend on your system. The way that mostly I do it is I end up looking at things with my eyes. So I look at the output of the validation script and it tells me things. You can set up sort of triggers and alarms. I know some people use if then that, IFTTT for that, especially for more personal projects. But it's gonna depend on your specific stack. Austin says, that's exactly what I'm seeing on your screen. There were data sets. Oh, sorry, that is for a different notebook. That is for this sample, extract, and transform data set. And for that, you should see both of these data sources. That's a good question. Jim says, I have a data versioning question specific to Kaggle. I know it's a little off topic, but if we have time, I'll elaborate. Okay, I will remind myself. Jim's question. And Austin says, any continuous integration service should cover that. Travis CI is a good example. Yeah, a lot of people use Travis. But I don't want to be like, this is the one tool to use, and then actually you can't use it for licensing reasons or whatever. Where were we? Right, so we validated our data, and now we can do the transformation step. So I've just done a little bit of cleaning here. If I zoom out, is that going to make this box larger? Yes, my lines, they don't wrap anymore. So I've just done a little bit of data cleaning here. So I'm taking these like 6 data files, and I am going through and getting just the information that I'm interested in. So I am going through every file in our data set that ends with .txt. I'm opening and I'm reading it in. This can be a little bit space efficient if you have a big data set. These are all very small. They're flat text files. They're not that many lines. This is something that you might want to try if you are working on larger data sets. I'm going through and I'm finding all of the instances where one of my keywords is followed by any other characters, and then the word head, and then I'm getting the things that happen before, anything that's between that. Sorry. Let me talk about this better with my words. Okay, so this looks for any instance of one of these words, and then any number of characters, any number of times, and then a space, and then any number of characters, any number of times, and then a space, and then the word head. So what I'm looking for is examples like, show me a data preview. So we can see that like we have slaughter cattle, 111 head, slaughter cows, 108 head. So I'm looking for the number in front of head. I could have said any digits 1 through 9, but I didn't want to specify that they were going to be numeric digits because people might write down the word WON. O-N-E, and I want to make sure that I was getting all of those. So that's what this does, and that sort of finds the number of things. So there's 2 capture groups here. The capture groups are in little parentheses, and this one captures the word in here, and then this one captures the number, and I'm throwing away the word head and the space before it, and any number of words and then spaces between this. Sorry. Anything but new lines. So this all has to be matched on a specific line. The dot character means anything but a new line, and then the star means any number of times. And then I am getting the name of the market. So it's always on the 4th line. In Python, we index from 0. So I'm splitting the data based on every new line, and I'm getting the 3rd one. Github says, does /s represent space in regex? It represents any white space character, I believe. And it is, if you're looking up regex things, make sure that you're specifying that you are using Python, because there are slight differences between like JavaScript regex and Perl regex that'll bite you in the butt. I say someone's butt who has been bitten. Dot star covers space as well. Yes. It does. So now I'm finding the market, which is always on the 4th line, and then I'm getting the date. So I am finding all of the instances where a line starts with return VA and then has something else after it. I'm only taking the something else that is after it, and then again I'm using the datetime utils to parse out the dates and then convert them to a date. If we do have sales, so this returns a list, and if the length of that list is greater than 0, then we add that information to our data frame. We create a data frame with that information, and then we add the market and then the date reported. which we also figured out here. If there were no sales, we create a new line that says category none and the number of heads sold is 0. And these are the same as the column labels that we specify outside of the loop because we're reusing it. And then we are, when we create our data frame from our list, we specify those. Raul says, it's a good practice to also make data validation scripts for data we are uploading in case the original data we loaded was anything new we did not take into account in transformation phase. Yeah, I think that can be a good idea. If it's something, again, it depends on, is it something that is likely to change? If it's something like, I think I used the example of the King James Bible versions, King James version of the Bible yesterday, because I'm working on another project that uses that. And that's not going to change, so you probably don't need to validate like, yep, it's the Bible. But something like stock reports, you want to make sure that, you're getting the stocks that you think that you're getting, or that sort of thing. So I would validate things that are likely to change and that will break your pipeline if they do change. Good question. So we are adding our information. So we create a new data frame called df_temp, and this is going to be rewritten every time we go through the loop. And then we created an empty data frame up here, and we are appending this temporary data frame we've created to the end every time. And when we looked at our clean data, we can see that there are 2 markets that have missing data. So Roanoke Collins and Rockingham. And that is the first and then the second to last. And if we scroll up, we can see that those are missing in our validation script. So that makes sense. And then we also see the number of sheep that were sold at other markets. So Central Virginia Livestock Auctions sold 7. Winchester sold 12 total, 10 lambs and 2 rams. And I think that this is actually probably rams and ewes, but we've just gotten the first word and thrown away everything else, so we just get the first word of that. And then the biggest seller is the, no surprise, Madison lamb, sheep, and goat sale, where there are a lot of sheep that get sold. So that's the data cleaning that we're doing, and this is a data frame that I'm going to save as a CSV that I could then use for other information later on, and I could plug into my if I wanted to do visualization or if I wanted to do forecasting. This is a data in a machine readable format that would be easy for me to work with, whereas 4 data files that look like this and are sort of not any sort of file format that it's easy for us to parse are going to be a little bit harder for us to work with. So that's our transformation step, and then we just save it out. So I'm just using to_CSV, and then I committed the kernel. So in the editor, there'll be a button that says commit. Sean says, do you save the CSV as a different version of your dataset? That's an excellent question. No, I save it as a new dataset. So that's sort of one of the key ideas of ETL is that your original dataset and your transformed dataset are saved separately in different places so that you keep both of them. Yeah, I do. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with the rest of my sentence. And since it's been committed, you can see it's been committed twice. I can look at the output, and I see that I actually have a couple things in here. I have my cleaned data set, and then I also have my script. If you will remember, we moved this data cleaning script into our working directory. So Kaggle /Kaggle/working, which is one directory up from where we are. So by moving it there, I am going to also have it in my output because your output files will include anything that you've added to your working directory. Austin says, committing is the only way to get Kaggle to version, correct? Yes, that is the only way to version your code. And then I can, that's kind of nice. You can see I can create a new data set right from here using this button, or I can create a new kernel, or I can just download everything. So if I'm sending it to somebody else, I can do that. And what I did was I actually created a data set from it. Scrolling up. So I go through the steps to do this here. Apparently you can also do it from here, which I didn't realize, from within your notebook. And I did that by going to Datasets, doobie, and then new data set, and then it's this slash in sharp brackets. What are those called? Greater than, less than. And you can see that I can specify that I only want to look at my work, and you'll see probably a bunch of just random junk, because this is an account I do a lot of testing on. Yeah, a bunch of random junk that have output files, and I can create data sets from them. And the data set that I made, I gussied up a little bit. Where is it? There we go. The data set that I made, I gussied up a little bit, and I can't find the thing I was looking for. There we go. Here it is. Here's the data set link that I was... here's the link to the data set I created from the output of my cleaning file. Alligators, Brian says. That's not what I was looking for, but thank you. Ashk says, today cleaning and transformation is really the ultimatum of a tri-day streaming. Yeah, it's the coming together and the whole process. Oh, there I see. So we can see the column labels, and then we can do a little bit of visualization and just checking things. We've got a quick little check for missing data, and we can see that there is no missing data. And these are relatively new if you haven't played around with them before. It's sort of nice. You can see the ratio of things, and you can also sort them if you're interested in doing that sort of thing. Anyway, there's some nice data visualization we've added relatively recently. Sean says, should I duplicate my ETL in Kaggle and GitHub, or just link one to the other? It depends on what your goal is. I would... So for things like a blog post or things that I wanted to share publicly, I might duplicate them. Well, I don't know. It depends. It depends on what your goal is. You can definitely link them to each other. If I had a lot of scripts, like a lot of cleaning and validation scripts, I will often do my pre-processing for NLP. I'll script that. And it's a little bit of a trial right now to get scripts into notebooks on Kaggle. So I might do maybe even one round of ETL just on GitHub, and then upload my data to Kaggle, and then even do a second round of ETL that's more data cleaning that's specific to my particular modeling project. It depends. I'm sorry. I know that I keep saying that in this event, but it's true. It does depend. So that is the whole process. You start with some data set that you're interested in working with, and you end up with a nice tidy version that you can, bring home to mom and show off. Specifically my mom, because she is sort of getting interested in data science, which is really fantastic. And yeah, I've been enjoying chatting with her about my work. So that's the process. And let's quickly do a new version. We got about 10 minutes. I think we might do a little bit. And Sabu says, it might depend on where your data consumers are. That's absolutely true. Yep. And also, like, who do you want to share it with? Kaggle is really nice for sort of sharing projects. There's some types of data that I think I mentioned on day one that you shouldn't be putting on Kaggle. Like, we're not HIPAA compliant. Please do not give us HIPAA data. We might be at some point in the future, but right now, no, please, thank you for everybody's delight. Please don't. Yeah. Okay, let's find that data set I made yesterday. WL says, meta question, is Kaggle an IDE, version control environment, data repository, cloud platform, training website, portfolio repository, etc., etc.? Yes. I think the marketing department would want me to tell you that Kaggle is the home of data science. Yeah, I think of it as, I guess I think of it as like a collection of different parts because I work on all of the different parts. Because you can't say that it's like GitHub for X because we also do hosted coding. Like, it is an IDE. It is a place for training. It is like a social network because you can chit chat on the forums. Yeah, let's call it the home of data science. The Pneumonia says, if you run ETL on new data, you have to upload the process CSV into the cleaned dataset manually. Onto the clean dataset manually. Okay, so you're saying if you have two ETL pipelines that are separate on different data sets and you end up with two outputs, I would probably save each of those outputs as a different data set and then add both data sets to a notebook that you are working on. Austin says, can you quickly run us through how you got to the breakdown of the cleaned sheep data, the part that shows percentages? Oh, this. Yeah. So this is, I've just gone to the landing page for this particular data set. And whenever you create a data set, we do a little bit of crunching. So I did nothing. I just uploaded the data set. And then I automatically got this, if that makes sense. If that was your question. Yeah, and it will, we'll only have like really nice, pretty descriptions for our first class data structures. So if we go to the LAM auction data, you can see that we get like a little preview of the text data, but we don't get like a lexicon or anything a little bit saucier. We just get sort of a little bit more boring, a little bit more exciting because we know what to do with tabular data. Excellent. Austin said he found it. So let's do a tiny bit of work and let's see if I can find the data set that we did yesterday. Oh, I didn't make it public. All right. So yesterday on the stream, we made a phonetics article. We made something from a URL endpoint. And let's just quickly work on this for a little bit. And the first thing I'm going to do is make it public and then I'll make it prettier later on. Sharing, make public permanently. And then let's create a new kernel and do a little bit of transformation. And I'm not actually going to do a whole lot of clean validation here because I don't think we have time for it. But I am going to do a little bit of transformation and then save it out so you can sort of see the process. Blah, 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 blah. Plus cleaning. I'm gonna do it in R. Sorry, I think it's just less. I've done a lot in Python. All of my example code so far was in Python, and I do want to do a little bit of R. And I do need a quick reminder of how to read JSON data into R. JSON R. There we go. I can look at my own code that I wrote earlier for the exact purposes of helping me out with this. Because I remember that there's multiple packages for reading in JSON, and one of them is really nice. And it's one that I recommended and is like really well optimized and delightful. JSONLite, there we go. Copy that. And then, I also do want that. All right, and then let's try to, I think it's read_JSON, is it? Yeah, it's read_JSON. Read JSON, and it's gonna be in the input folder, and then we just called it search. And then we can look at the head of data, I believe. I think this is something, yeah, I think this is something that Okay, so I'm seeing that some of these look like there are responses from the some of these are information from the search itself, and then the data doc. So this is a list right now in R. So I think I can probably do as data frame just the docs portion, because it looks like this is gonna be something that is tabularizable. Is that gonna work? Let's find out. WL says, so you just searched on your own use and description of an R package. Yeah, basically. I don't know, I can't remember all the things I've done forever in my head. And I think I also talked about JSON structure. That's not what I want. Gross 1 and 3. Did I talk about how to convert JSON to tables? I did not. Convert JSON to data frame JSONLite. JSONLite. Getting started with JSON and JSONLite. That does sound like, oh, here we go. From JSON, it looks like it is. So let's try this function. Will that work? Okay, argument text must be JSON string, URL, or file. Oh, interesting. Okay. So it's already turned docs into a table already. Excellent. So let's call this article info, and then articles equals article info, and then we just need to get the part of it that is a data frame, because in R, any item in a list can be any data type. And then if we look at the head of articles, well, that didn't work. Why not? Let's look at the structure. What type of data have I gotten here? Nothing. Article info. It's a list. Article info. Oh, I see. So docs is actually structured, it is actually nested under response. So if I do the head of articles, yeah, nice. Very helpful. So on phonetically similar cognates, cross-linguistic distribution. So actually, let's just do that. I think that is a reasonable amount of thing, and I don't think we actually need the tidyverse for this. Convert to CSV. So we read in the JSON file, because we don't need all the header information every time that we run this. And then we can just say information on the articles, extract data frame with information on the articles from our list. So this particular one, the search term was phonetic. So you can see differences in phonetic discrimination, and it had to be in the title. So highly variable phonetic training, latent semantic action, verbs reflect phonetic parameters of intensity and emotional content. Do they though? Michael Patterson? Anyway, I'm skeptical of this particular research. And then let's just save it out. And then commit the dataset. Save out our file. I think it's write CSV, and then the first thing is the thing that I want to write, and then the next thing is the path, which is going to be /Kaggle /working, and then let's call it articles.csv. And that should work. Wham, wham, wham. Didn't know how to handle vector of type list. Interesting. So what's the structure of this? Is it a list? Let's make it a data frame and then see if that will work. So I think the problem is that the authors in here are lists. Although it says it's a data frame. Interesting. WL says, would you say that R or Python is better at taking data in any format and then transforming it into something much more palatable? It depends. If at some point you want something in a table, I would say that R is better at it because there's a richer ecosystem, so you don't have to write a lot of the, there's a lot of really well-engineered packages that you can just import and use to do the scut work. For, you know, data that's really any data type, like video data, I might go with Python instead. I don't work with video a lot though, so Ryan says you forgot the line to do, convert to Python. I've done so much Python this week, you guys. Give me a little smackerel bar. And Bart says the DF still contains a list. Yeah, it's the authors that are lists. Although in theory, let me see. Okay, so columns in a data frame are vectors, and vectors cannot contain lists. So, let's add a new code cell and take just a look at the column. Author display, I think. And then just look at the head of that. All right, so I want to convert this to, oops. Can I convert this to a, so I want to convert each item in the list to a vector. What if I do unlist? Okay, but that converts it into a single vector, and I want to convert each one into a vector. What about that? Let's find our vector list in data frame to well, let's just see. Populating blah blah blah. Data frame columns can contain list. Write to CSV. Write.list looks like it might be. Write.table. Any columns in a data frame which are lists. Let's see. Lists. Or have a class, e.g. dates, will be converted to the by the appropriate as.character method. So let's try write.csv instead of write_CSV. Error, unused argument. What are my arguments here? X and then file. Okay, so it should be exactly the same. So this should work. It did not. Diane said unlist. So when I tried to unlist it, it unlisted. So instead of changing this into a single vector, it changed this into a single vector. So I would lose information if I just unlisted it. Error names, unimplemented type list in encode element. Listen, buddy, you just said in the documentation that columns which are lists will be converted. That is what I expected to happen. All right. Perhaps it's because I did write.csv and not write.table. Maybe there's a difference. Nope, still didn't work. Unimplemented type list in encode element. Or convert list in data frame column to character. Converting a list to a data frame. How can I convert a data list into a data frame? Data frame. Character variables are passed to data frame, converted to factor columns. Maybe the problem is that it is not actually a data frame? It looks like it's writing out correctly. Let's see if this will help. Maybe I just need to convert it. Nope, that didn't work. Sean says, it's one thing I don't like about the R documentation. It says one thing and then you get something totally different. That's not an R problem. That's a people didn't update their documentation problem. List to DF from QDAP tools. Convert a named list of vectors to data frame. Bart says that goes for all documentation. Yeah. And I will say that the documentation for base R in particular tends to be a little bit less frequently updated than the documentation for a lot of the packages that I use in the tidy base. So write.table is base R. So what is the structure of articles? It's a data frame. 10 observations of 9 variables. What's the structure of iris? How does that look? Yeah, it looks the same. Oh, so iris is the iris setosa or whatever data set, and it's just a built-in primitive in R. Bubbly60 says unnest. Let's try that. What was it called? Articles? All nested columns must have the same number of elements. What if I just asked for the author one? No applicable method for unnest applied to object of class list. Unlist. My worry about unlist is that it will create a single list from all of these instead of the multiple lists that instead of, oh, right. Author display. Yeah, so unlisting creates a single vector. Actually, you know what might do it is, I'm going to start using tidyverse functions again, so I'm going to add it. Oop. Okay. So what I'm going to try and do is take articles and then let's grab, let's actually mutate and say that the column author display is an unlist of the column author display. And this might automatically do this row by row because the tidyverse is great and it just makes my life easier generally. All right, that did not happen. You know what? I think it might actually be simple as just changing it to as character. All right, yeah. Okay, that worked. One sec. Back. That was the vacuum again because I keep going more than an hour, but it's fun and I'm enjoying it, and I hope that you guys are enjoying it as well. And if you're not, you're free to just like leave, and that's okay. All right, so what I did was I converted this to a single character vector instead of a, so it was a vector, and instead I have turned it into a string. So that should work. Whoop. And it's gone through and it's done it. So I'm replacing, mutate replaces the column, creates the column author display, which is the same name as the existing column, so it overwrites it. And in it, it takes the content of the column author display as a character. So let's get rid of these where I was trying to figure out what was wrong. Convert list of author names to character vector. And then, so because it is, we've saved the syntax, we can create it, we can change it back to a vector if we want to later. And at this point, we should be able to, given my option, I would prefer write CSV. Do not know how to handle a vector of type lists. So there shouldn't be any lists left in here. It should be just like a normal data set. It shouldn't have any problems. Unimplemented type list and encode elements. Let's actually look at the structure of articles. So it could be that even though we have converted it, oh, it's abstract. It's abstract that is causing us the issues. Okay, so let's do the same thing that we did here to abstract as well. I don't know why this would have been saved as a list, but I guess it was. And now it should work. Hey, it worked. Excellent. So the abstract was also being saved as a vector, so it was a list. And then when it was added to the data frame was fine. Data frames can handle it. But when we tried to write it out as a CSV, because lists are hierarchical and CSVs are tabular, we got an error, which is good. We should get an error. We don't want to write hierarchical things in a flat structure because we will lose information. All right, so what I'm gonna do is, first I'm gonna make this public so y'all can see it if you're interested in it. This very exciting script that just does like a tiny bit of data cleaning. And now when I commit it, boop, 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 once it's done committing, it runs all the code top to bottom, actually in a separate VM. So if you want to, once you hit commit, you can sort of leave, do other things, go back to the editor, keep editing your code. It shouldn't matter. And then we can check out the version. Boop. I can also just remove edit from here and I will see the most recent version. And you'll see that we have added, there's a new tab here that there isn't in I don't have any open right now, but in notebooks that don't have any files saved out, you won't have an output tab. Here we do have one, and I can just create a data set from it. So I'm going to call this cleaned plus phonetics articles info. And I can now hit create, and it will make a new data set that I can read into other things. And if I update, you know, the other data set in the future, I can run this cleaning script. I'll get a nice clean CSV out, and then I can repeat my analysis with another cleaned version. And everything is versioned and lovely, and I can go back and see what I did earlier. And yeah, that's the thing. We just set up a very tiny pipeline. And then of course the final and interesting step of the pipeline would be to do something like some sort of phonetic analysis, some sort of a NLP analysis or something on the data set itself, so we could learn something about it. All right, so that is the end of day 3. This is the final product is the knowledge. I'll make this public as well. It's not the most exciting data set, but I figure you guys might like to check it out, I guess. So it's public, and you can now see this. One sec, let me change the name so it's actually accurate. Save changes. Okay, so it's a public data set that we created. We did the whole pipeline for it today, except for the extract that we did yesterday. We created a data set from a URL. We wrote a script to do the data cleaning. We didn't really do any validation, but that's something that we could add later, and we did walk through how to do validation yesterday, so don't feel too bad about that. And then we created a new data set from it that we can write a kernel on and do our analysis and get insights or models or visualizations or whatever it is that you're working on out of. And it's not the most exciting data set, but it's a good example of the whole process. So I'm gonna call it there. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I will really be better about being on the forums today for including any other bugs that I find. I've been on a roll lately, putting the platform through its paces. And yeah, thanks for joining me. I will be live coding on Friday at my usual time, which is 4 p.m. Pacific. So if you're interested in seeing me code some more, you can join for that. I hope that this was really useful for you guys. This is a lot of stuff that I did not know when I started to be a data scientist. And Grandpa Potato says I learned a lot. Daniel says I learned a lot as well. Good. I'm really happy to hear that. I tried to put together some information that is like stuff I wish I'd known 2 years ago. Yeah, thanks for joining. Again, I'll be trying to be a little bit more responsive today. I did say that yesterday, and I was not very much more responsive, but today I really do mean it. And I will see you guys on Friday if you join me then, or next Wednesday when we'll be continuing reading the BERT paper for the Kaggle reading group. Thanks so much for joining me. And yeah, have a great rest of your week. Oh, WL says set of ML and deep learning tutorials for R in the future. You keep asking for these. Maybe. Yeah. What are we doing this today? So I'm trying to remember what language we're doing the transformer stuff in. I think it's Python. But yeah, definitely something that we can think about. All right, and I look forward to seeing your pipelines. Please feel free to share them with me, tweet them at me. I'm RCTATMAN on Twitter. Let me know what you're doing. I'm interested to see what you guys come up with. All right, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you on Kaggle. Until then, bye-bye.